Yeah, welcome back to part 4. It gets sweeter, or better, or more provoking. Now, Willie Lynch continues, and I quote, "For example, if you take a slave, if you teach him all about your language, he will know all your secrets, and he is then no more a slave. For you can't fool him any longer. And being a slave, and being a fool, is one of the basic ingredients of any incidents to the maintenance of the slavery system. For example, if you told a slave that he must perform in getting out our crops, and he knows the language, well, he would know that our crops don't mean our crops. And the slavery system would break down, for he would relate on the basis of what our crops really mean, or really meant, unquote. I tell you guys, you got to read this letter. You should teach your kids, you should read it, evaluate it with a dictionary and with common sense. So, here again, you can see for yourself if you read the letter along with me. Sorry I couldn't put it up on the screen and go through it like in a lecture or stuff. But that's, I just have to do what I have to do. So here again, you can see for yourself that it was never the intent of the slave masters then to teach the slaves the English language. And it sure is not the intent of the slave masters, or to be more correct, the slave masters' heirs and successors today, to teach us, the descendants of the slaves today, in this time, their English language. It is interesting. I just want to point out here that I heard one commentator on one local radio station. They send he's a politician, they send their kids to Europe, to those places to learn language. Anyway, let me continue. For again, according to the master, scientist and engineer, Willie Lynch, if you take a slave, if you teach him all about your language, and I wanted to note here, unlike what those Mr. PhDs and others are saying because they are professors of English, if you teach him all about if you teach him all about your language, not some about your language, but all about your language, he will know all your secrets, and he is then no more a slave, for you can't fool him any longer. And being a slave, or rather being a fool, is one of the basic ingredients of any incidents to the maintenance of the slavery system, unquote. So here you have it. Here I want you to note the amount of things that will happen if or when we and our children should ever truly know all about the English language, which is whose language? Slave master's language. If and when we should all know about the English language. I like to remind people, not just because you hear people twang or speak with, as people would say, nice, means that they know what the hell they're talking about, or they know the language, or know the secrets of the language. We don't know. We are ignorant. That's why we are in slavery for so long, mental and otherwise. Anyway, let me continue. So here are some of the things that you will know once you know, and things that will happen once you get to know the language. Or the more these things will happen, the more we get to know and can get into the mindset of the slave masters then and their heirs and successors now. First thing that will happen, and Willie Lynch himself predicted it, and it is that we will know the slave master's secret. So from this, the slave master's own mouth, and not just the words of I, the Mystic Philosopher, we can affirm that his secrets, or their secrets, are in their language. In this case, the English language. The second thing that will happen is that we will automatically become free. Again, from the slave master's own mouth, Willie Lynch, he said, he is then no more a slave once he learned the language. So our freedom is dependent upon what? Our knowledge and understanding of whose? The slave master's language. Not our language, because we don't even know our language. And which is, of course, the English language. The third thing that will happen, that I must point out here, is that we will no longer be fools. The slave master said it. They can't and they couldn't continue to tell us that they are white. Wish I had something white to show those who don't know what white is. Meaning pure, superior, and light, etc. Unblemished, you name it. They are coming to tell you that they are white. And guess what? You black. And that we are black. Which means what? Evil, ignorance, threatening, etc. And like idiots, like dumb fools and animals, without that ability to think and process and understand words, we are continuing to believe them. They call you, they blacklist you and they whitelist themselves. They are closer to the light, you are banished in darkness, the pit of hell. Fourth thing that will happen, let me continue. The fourth thing that will happen is that their evil slavery economic system will collapse and die what I call an unnatural death. And why an unnatural death? Because the system is unnatural. Slavery, exploitation, this form of abuse and these things is unnatural. It is not duplicated nowhere in nature. The way people are treated today, dying from hunger, while some people have over 2 million. One man I know recently have over 2 million acres of land. And there are people can't even find a burial spot on the planet, let alone a place to live. These things are unnatural. And the system would collapse once we start to learn their language and know the truth. But more on that at another time. Sweat your appetite. Now, Willie Lynch continued. He said, so you have to be careful. The word careful is a compound word. It's 2 words. In other words, you have to be filled, or if you want to say full of care. You have to be very careful in setting up, in instituting, in establishing the new language. For the slave would soon be in your house talking to you as man to man, and that is death to our economic system, unquote. Boy, I tell you, this letter is heavy. I don't know, I haven't heard people talking more about it. For those of you that have eyes to see and ears to hear, and an active, not a dormant mind, but an active, intelligent, and independent mind that can and will think on its own, you will deduce that the house being spoken of here was not just the old plantation house. It was not just the old farmhouse or the slave master's mansion, castle house, and possible his whorehouse or the house of the rising sun. But from my perspective, Willie Lynch was speaking prophetically. Yes, he was a prophet. He was a predictor. He was speaking futuristically, and I show you why. You see, Willie Lynch knew, these guys, we take these guys for fools. No, they aren't. He knew that the day or the night would come when the contemptuously called black and Negro slaves would be educated or schooled beside some of the slave master's children in the slave master's universities and college house. And he also knew that the day or the night would come when the contemptuously called black and Negro slaves would be positioned in position of authority in the slave masters' universities and colleges as professors and in their college houses and university houses. He, Willie Lynch, knew and was speaking prophetically. He knew that the day and the night would come when the contemptuously called black and nigger slaves would be positioned in a position of power and authority in one of the slave masters' many great houses. Example, he knew that the time would come when the slaves would be elected or selected by the system as what? Religious leaders, pastors, priests, bishops, evangelists, you name them. In what? In the slave master's house of what? God. Or in his slave master's God's house of his slave master's gods. He knew that. He knew the day and the night would come when the contemptuously called black or nigger slaves would be elected, selected as governors in the slave master's governor's house. Elected or selected as judges and judiciaries in what? In the slave master's court houses. Elected and selected representatives in what? In the slave master's house of Congress, house of Parliament, house of the Senate, or the Senate House, however you want to place it, in the House of Commons, or in the House of the Commoners. He knew that the day and the night would come when the contemptuously called black or nigger slaves would be elected and positioned as actors, announcers, broadcasters, talk show hosts, journalists, writers, and program managers in the slave master's what? Radio, television, and print media houses. And above all, Willie Lynch knew that the day or the night would come when the contemptuously called black or nigger slaves could even be elected or selected by the system as what? Commander-in-Chief, Chief Executive Officer, as president, and sits where? In the slave master's Oval Office. Located where? In the west wing of the slave master's what? White House. He knew that. So he was speaking prophetically. So Willie Lynch knew that if all these future elected, selected, contemptuously called black or nigger slaves were to truly know and understand all about his English language, the master's peculiar language, while being in these exalted position of power and authority, then they might or they would overthrow them, the slave masters and the slavery economic system, and possibly as payback, they would, or revenge as some would say, they would now be made slaves to their reviled and contemptuously called black and nigger slaves. Willie Lynch knew that. So, for your information, not just because you may see some of your great religious and political leaders, your educators and scholars, your motivational and charismatic speakers appearing in positions of power and authority, and is throwing it down, it doesn't mean that they truly know and understand the slave master's language. Therefore, his secrets, not at all. Just ask yourself this simple question. Assuming that I, the mystic philosopher, assume that I am right about the word black, that I've been trying to wake people up to stop calling yourself black. The first step towards liberation and insight, I think. Right? Then why, if I am right about the word black, then why are all these system-trained, educated, selected and elected politicians, judiciaries, money changers and bank and black religious pushers, etc., why are they still answer are answering to the word black. Why they still call themselves black? Why do they still represent themselves and others as being black? And will even persecute, not only criticize, but they will even persecute people like me, who is only trying to tell them that they are not black. That black means evil in the man's language, the alien language. It means evil among many other derogatory, satanic, poisonous things. Check it for yourself. That the people that they are calling, that's all I'm trying to tell you, the people that they are calling white, and they are being, that they are not white, and that they are being duped. Why? Well, I humbly submit, or I put it to you, that it is because they have been cursed by the system, and it is because the Willie Lynch scientific techniques on breaking, making, and keeping a slave are working today more effective than ever. Willie Lynch continues, and I quote, "In addition to the definition of words or terms," sorry, let me repeat. "In addition to the definition of words or terms are only a let me repeat that again. In addition, the definition of words or terms are only a minute part of the process. Values are created and transported by communications through the body of the language. A total society has many interconnected value systems. All the values in the society have bridges of languages, or bridges of language to connect them for orderly working in the society. But for these language bridges, these many value systems would sharply clash and cause internal strife or civil war, the degree of the conflict being determined by the magnitude of the issues or related opposing strength in whatever forms," unquote. Now, something I want to point out here. Please note that Willie Lynch said, that the definitions of words or terms are only a minute part of the process, unquote. For your information, the process is the overall slavery system, or the overall slavery economic system. And what is a system? A system is a group of parts or a combination of units that function together as a whole according to some common law or purpose, unquote. So from this you'll know that if one part or one unit in a system, for example, your car is a system, your engine, the car engine is a system, and if one part isn't working properly, then the whole system will malfunction, right? Or the system could be rendered dead or ineffective, or we say useless. The word minute means tiny, and it also means precise and detailed. Therefore, the definition or the meaning of words or terms is an integral part of the process, the system. In other words, to the slave masters, the definition and meanings of words is an integral part of the system that they are effectively using to keep us in mental, physical, spiritual, and financial slavery. And so it is incumbent upon us, the survivors of the system, the slaves today, it is incumbent upon us to at least try and know all about, or as much as possible about, the British slave masters and their heirs and successors' English language. And by so doing, the meanings and definitions of the names by which we call, and the meanings and definitions of the words that we are using to describe ourselves must never be underestimated or overlooked. I strongly recommend we always keep a dictionary handy. Please join me in part 5. Gets better.